that this research is being done with my supervisor, Associate Professor Dr. Narsarima Saleh. So me and unfortunately, she's unable to be here today. So I will be presenting this research on behalf of both of us. So the title of my research is The Moderation Effect of Software Engineers' Emotional Intelligence Between Their Work Ethics and Their Work Performance. So I'll be going straight to the background of my research. As you all are aware of, in today's ICT-based society, development of software has become a core element, be it governments, educational institutions, healthcare, security, banking, and many other sectors. They are all using systems that involve software. And these systems are actually benefiting society greatly. And we can say that without the software, these systems would not function. So it can be said that the software engineers behind the development of these software are impacting society greatly. So since they have the power to affect society so much, they also have a duty to exercise that power in a responsible and ethical manner. Otherwise, it could cause great damage. And we have seen this happen before many times. Some examples of this is, I think all of you have heard of this. In March 2018, the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal occurred, in which Cambridge Analytica, a data analytics company based in the UK, they were found to have harvested the personal data of millions of people's Facebook profiles without their consent, and they used this to influence a variety of political campaigns. And just the fact that they harvested personal data without their permission is a huge unethical action. And another example of this is in 2017, the Volkswagen emissions scandal occurred. Volkswagen is a car company where they were found to have used a defeat device to cheat on emission tests to sell a large number of vehicles in the US. And what's appalling about this incident is that misinformation, wrong information, was purposely being generated by software that was developed by professionals, by software engineers who were knowingly part of this illegal and unethical action. So these two examples that I just mentioned are just a few of the many instances that have occurred and keep occurring where software is developed and used for illegal or unethical reasons. Now, there was a study in 2017 by Rogerson et al. They said that the consideration of ethics in the IT industry is often neglected until events like these occur. And in the aftermath of these incidences, members of the public, they reignite the discussion on the ethical standards of IT companies. They call for tighter regulations on them. And even with them voicing these demands time and time again, not enough is being done in the industry. And there's a study by Ferrari et al. 2017 that said that anything digital is inevitably affected by values. The organizational values of the project sponsor, the values of the research partners, and the values of each developer and designer. So the values of those who are involved in building software definitely have an effect on the outcome of the project and what will happen later on. So this lack of effort done on ethics in the industry, this lack of effort on ethics is also present in education and research. There's a study conducted in 2005 by Logan and Clarkson. They did a review of programs offered by universities in information security, and they found that there's a pattern of strong technical content and the absence of an ethics and computer law course. So they found a lot of technical content, but they didn't find any courses on ethics or computer law. And in a more recent study in 2017, there's a study by Rogerson et al. They reviewed topics covered by several international and national information system conferences and textbooks, and they found that the topic of ethics is totally missing or minimally represented. And this is quite surprising because in the IT world, ethics is a very crucial issue in order for things to move successfully and smoothly and to be beneficial to society, ethics is indeed a very important thing in the IT world. So it can be observed that between 2005 and 2017, not much has improved in education as well as in research in the area of ethics, especially with regards to software engineers. So these findings show that there is an urgent need to increase awareness, interest, and action on the ethical dimension of ICT in education, in industries, and in research. So one way of taking action in research is to investigate the relationships between the ethics of software engineers and other variables, especially interpersonal variables, such as their job satisfaction, their work performance, their organizational commitment. These are all variables that have to do with software engineers themselves at their workplace. So if we can do research between these variables and their ethics, it might bring to light information that we can use to come up with a solution for this very important area. So based on my review of past literature, the research on the interpersonal characteristics of software engineers are quite scant, especially in relation to their ethics. There is a study in 2013. They said that in the context of organizational behavior, software development remains a poorly understood process. You know, organizational behavior has to do with employees' behavior at the workplace. What I said a bit earlier about work performance, job satisfaction, organizational commitment. So they're saying that in this area, software development remains a poorly understood process. So that's why in this study, if the relationships between the ethics of software engineers and their interpersonal characteristics are investigated, then this will help in understanding the dynamics surrounding the ethics of software engineers and what can be done to improve the situation. So therefore, in this study, the researchers aim to investigate the ethics of software engineers and how it is related with other interpersonal variables. And this may give valuable information on what can be done to improve the situation. So two such variables that we have decided to include in this study are the emotional intelligence of software engineers and their work performance. And after this, I will be explaining why we decided to choose these two variables. So first, let's start with emotional intelligence. Let's go to the definition of emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence was first described formally by Salovey and Mayer in 1990 as the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and actions. Basically, it's about our ability to understand our own emotions and the emotions of those around us and using that information to guide our actions. So if we go to software engineers who are actually employees, there are studies that have found that there is an evident relationship between an employee's individual characteristics, such as his or her ethical beliefs, and unethical behavior at the workplace. So there's an evident relationship between individual characteristics and their unethical behavior based on these studies. And however, along with individual characteristics, there may also be situational characteristics that can cause an employee to behave unethically. So along with individual characteristics, there are also situational characteristics external to the software engineers at their workplace. So there is a theory called the affective events theory, which was developed by organizational psychologists Weiss and Corpanzano in 1996. They explained that emotions experienced by workers at the workplace have an influence on handling workplace situations, which can be positive or negative. So the emotions that they feel at the workplace has a definite influence on the way that they handle situations, which could be positive or negative. So if we go back to software engineers and we look at their workplace, if we look at their job, we'll find that software engineers, they work in rapidly changing business environments that are demanding, competitive, and this results in them facing a lot of pressure, which leads to stress. So Rizvani and Khosravi 2019, this study say that increasing levels of stress affect a software engineer's ability to self-regulate their feelings and understanding. And as software engineers are humans, and according to AET theory that I mentioned a while ago, software engineers, they not only bring their personalities, ethical beliefs, knowledge, and skills to their work, they also bring their emotions. So, as I mentioned a bit earlier, the complex nature of a software engineer's job, it calls for intense social interactions. And such interactions cause stress and many emotions, and this can affect their ethical decision-making. And this was found by these studies over here. And I just like to stress on this, I like to highlight this. The stress that software engineers face, it can affect their ethical decision-making. This is a really important finding from these studies. So what this is telling us is that in stressful situations, a software engineer with a higher EQ is more likely to manage their emotions better, leading to lower levels of stress and more likely to have better ethical decision-making. And this was found by this study, FU 2014. So that's why in this study, I have decided, the researchers have decided to include EQ as one of the variables that will be investigated in relation to the ethics of software engineers. And studies investigating this relationship are scant, and previous researchers of other areas have also recommended this investigation. So in order to stress the importance of EQ, there's a study by Bay and McKeage 2006. They said that it may eventually be shown that emotional intelligence is one of the variables that may explain the current gap between ethical understanding and ethical behavior. They're indicating that EQ could be the gap between ethical understanding and actual ethical action behavior. So along with EQ, the second variable that we are including a lot to study with the work ethics of software engineers is their work performance. So the performance of employees is crucial to the success of a company, and unethical behavior of employees will negatively impact this. This is found by these studies. So work performance, and if employees behave in an unethical manner, this definitely affects their performance, and that will definitely have a negative impact on the success of companies. And along with that, it was found that EQ has a positive correlation with work performance. So that's why we have decided to include work performance in this study, along with EQ and work ethics. So therefore, in this study, the researchers will investigate whether EQ moderates the relationship between the work ethics of software engineers and their work performance. We're trying to see whether EQ strengthens the relationship between work ethics and work performance. And the findings of the study is expected to give empirical evidence and valuable information, work ethics and EQ in software engineers for improving their ethical behavior in their work. So in order to demonstrate the relationship that I just explained that we will investigate in the study, here's a diagram where work ethics is the independent variable and work performance is a dependent variable, and emotional intelligence is in between this relationship. It's a moderating variable. So we're going to study whether emotional intelligence strengthens the relationship between work ethics and work performance or not. So the research objective and research question is the following. The research objective is to empirically investigate how emotional intelligence moderates the relationship between work ethics of software engineers and their work performance. And the question for that would be, how does EQ moderate the relationship between the work ethics of software engineers and their work performance? So in order to fulfill this objective, hierarchical multiple regression analysis will be used. So I'm going to go straight to describing the sample and data collection. The population of this research is software engineers working in IT or software engineering companies, and the sample was randomly taken from software engineers working in IT SE companies via LinkedIn. And so basically the random sampling technique was used. So more than 500 software engineers on LinkedIn were selected at random, and each of them were sent a questionnaire containing 3 instruments. The first one measuring their emotional intelligence, the second one measuring their work ethics, and the third one measuring their work performance. So a total of 170 software engineers responded out of the 500, and therefore the sample size is n equals to 170. And I'd like to point out that most statisticians have agreed that for the random sampling technique, a minimal size of 100 is sufficient for a meaningful result to be found. So that's why the size of 170 is deemed sufficient for this study. So the instruments that are used in this study is, the first one is EQ, emotional intelligence, was measured using the Wang and Law emotional intelligence scale. And this was developed by Wang and Law in 2002. And this instrument measures 4 dimensions, which is self-emotions appraisal, regulation of emotions, use of emotion, and others' emotion appraisal. And for the second instrument, work ethics of software engineers, will be measured using the Islamic work ethics instrument developed by Kamaluddin and A.B. Mannan in 2010. And this instrument measures 4 dimensions as well: effort, honesty, teamwork, and accountability. And the researchers would like to point out that as these 4 dimensions, effort, honesty, teamwork, and accountability, are universal work ethics, so that's why this instrument was deemed suitable for using in this study. And the third one is work performance, will be measured using the individual work performance that was developed by Koopmans in 2014. And this instrument measures 3 dimensions, which are task performance, contextual performance, and counterproductive work behavior. So all of these instruments are using Likert scale items. And after the collection of data, the data analysis was conducted using IBM SPSS Statistics version 22. And all the assumptions necessary for conducting hierarchical multiple regression on the data were met. We referred to layered statistics 2015 in order to check whether the data fulfill all the assumptions necessary for conducting hierarchical multiple regression. And yes, we found that they do fulfill all the assumptions. So we ran the data analysis and the results. Before I go to the results, I'd just like to again highlight that work ethics in this study is an independent variable, while EQ is a moderating variable as well as an independent variable, and work performance is a dependent variable. So in order to run the hierarchical multiple regression in SPSS, we ran multiple regression with 2 models. So it's hierarchical multiple regression, and that would show us whether EQ is moderating the relationship between work ethics and work performance. So to explain the 2 models that we entered into the analysis, the first model has the total emotional intelligence and total work ethics separately, individually. And in the second model, we have the 2 variables over here interacting with each other. This means work ethics is multiplied by EQ, and the interaction term of them are being entered in the second model. So if we compare the 2 models, we will be able to find out whether EQ does moderate the relationship between work ethics and work performance or not. So this is the results of the analysis. And in this table, it shows the model summary for both of the models. So in order to see whether moderation is occurring, we're going to look for the R-square value. And if there's a change in R-square in the second model, if there's an increase, and this would indicate moderation, and then the significant value over here, the p-value, would indicate whether it's significant or not. So over here, we can see that from 0.336, it increased to 0.354. And since the p-value is less than 0.05, we can conclude that significant moderation is indeed occurring. So in order to repeat what I said with more clarity, R-square changed from 0.336 to 0.354. The R-squared change equals to 0.018, and the p-value is 0.034. And this is significant at the 0.05 levels, therefore significant moderation is occurring. So it can be said that the addition of the interaction term to the prediction of work performance, model 2, led to a statistically significant increase in R-square of 0.018. So the results show that EQ does significantly strengthen the relationship between work ethics and work performance. So to discuss these results, from these results, we can see that for software engineers who had stronger EQ, their work ethics had a stronger positive relationship with their work performance. So this means that the higher a software engineer's EQ, then the bigger the influence of their work ethics on their work performance. And these findings actually have important implications for both the IT SE industry as well as the education sector. If you remember, in the introduction, I mentioned that a lot of unethical incidents have occurred in the past and are still occurring. And even though they are occurring, not much is being done in the industry as well as in education and research. So this study has contributed in the area of research. This study has investigated how work ethics of software engineers is related with other interpersonal variables to understand better what could be done to improve the situation. So the findings that the study has found, they provide empirical evidence that EQ can significantly strengthen the influence of work ethics of software engineers on their work performance. So therefore, the researchers strongly suggest that steps should be taken to incorporate EQ training into IT SE industries as well as in educational curriculums. And actually, previous studies have found that EQ training did indeed improve the trainees' EQ. At the same time, steps should be taken to teach and train ethics more actively in IT SE industries and in education, because this study, it has to do with both work ethics combined with EQ. So it's like if EQ and work ethics go together, then it's like it strengthens the relationship between ethics and the work performance. So both of these need training. And with regards to ethics training, there's a study by Wood in 2019 that found that there is a significant positive relationship between ethics training and ethical decision making and moral reasoning. So it's like ethics training over time does indeed improve the ethical decision making of moral reasoning. So it can be seen from these studies that training does indeed improve EQ and ethics of software engineers. So the conclusion of the study is that if steps are taken to train EQ and ethics in IT and software engineering industries, as well as in education, then based on the findings of this research, it will improve the ethical behavior of software engineers in their work, reduce the occurrence of unethical incidents that cause great harm to society, and instead it will increase beneficial contributions to society. So this is the conclusion of our study. And in terms of contribution, the researchers would like to say that this study is expected to increase the number of studies done on the interpersonal characteristics of software engineers and the relationships it has with ethics, because in the introduction I mentioned that in this area there are very few studies that have been done. So and we also hope that this research could urge other researchers to do further research on this important and urgent area. And for future research recommendations, we'd like to recommend that this study that we have done is quantitative. So what other researchers could do is they could do qualitative studies that utilize interviews, focus groups, case studies, and so on to gather data. And because that could bring different information to light that this study did not bring to light. And also longitudinal studies could also be attempted. And another recommendation for further research is that this study that we did, investigated the relationship between work ethics and work performance with EQ as a moderating variable. Well, in the future, other research could be done where the work ethics of software engineers is investigated with different variables that have not been explored yet, such as job satisfaction, motivation, team flexibility, team climate, and so on. Because I feel like if this research is done with other variables, then hopefully this will reveal more information about the dynamics surrounding work ethics of software engineers. And hopefully in the future, this will continue to increase our understanding of this important area and help to reduce the unethical behavior that has been occurring in the past, and hopefully reduce the occurrence of unethical incidents and instead increase ethical behavior and good positive contributions to society and so on. So that is what our study is about. And yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions, you're most welcome to ask them.